I mean, let's recap. Before the season, Oklahoma and Texas announced they're leaving the Big 12 for the SEC. Then BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF announced they're leaving the American for the Big 12. So let's recap the college football season today. 6 teams for now are changing conferences. 3 coaches have been fired, and 25 ranked teams have already lost. And it's not even October 1st. God, I love college football. I think what jumps out with me as far as the 25 teams that have lost, you've got 9 members of the preseason top 25 that have already lost twice, including Clemson, Iowa State, North Carolina, Wisconsin. Of that group, you throw in Indiana, USC, Washington, and Utah. Of that group, Clemson somehow remains ranked at 25th. Certainly not on my ballot, but the other people that vote for the poll, I guess, were mesmerized by the Tigers averaging 7 points a game. But anyway, of that group, what do you think has been the biggest disappointment for you so far?
Well, Clemson, obviously. I mean, even as we talk about this, I know that they dropped down to 25th in the AP poll, and I know that you have them dropped out completely. I hammered them as much as I could in the power ratings. They still fell 15th in the Action Network power ratings. And as I'm looking at the live board right now, WinBet lists them as, a 16-point favorite over Boston College. I mean, what is this? Are you trying to goat me into thinking that they're going to turn it around? Everything I said last week about them getting it fixed on the offensive line and DJ getting, some reps with his wide receivers, he still is not throwing accurately. He is still not getting the proper protection that he needs. And now your best defensive player on the defensive line is out for the season. Will Shipley, their top running back so far, is going to be out for like a month. I don't understand the love affair with Clemson. Like, I'm off the train. Last week, I thought they could pull it together. I'm officially off the train. So maybe now that I'm off the train, Clemson can find their way back into the AP top 25. But, I'm not surprised by Iowa State. We know that this happens in September all the time. I'm ready to pull the trigger on Kansas at a spread that's over 30. As far as North Carolina goes, we knew Sam Howell had some issues with new weapons around him. I'm not surprised by that. Wisconsin's offense last year, we just didn't take it seriously enough. We thought it was the Graham Mertz injury. We thought it was the COVID running through the trenches on that team. Turns out the offense is pretty poor. So really not a lot of, really Clemson is the biggest shock to me in all of college football. I can't let you get away before we get into our segments. I can't talk about your bowl rankings, your bowl projections without mentioning that you moved Arkansas from the Birmingham Bowl to the Sugar Bowl. I know it was
the Sugar Bowl.
Yeah, to the Sugar Bowl against OU with a spread of 6. I would hammer Arkansas plus 6 against OU all day.
I did it for you, Collin. I mean, look, you gotta stop ignoring them. I mean, you could make a legitimate argument based on the games that have been played this season, not based on preseason expectations and all that, but simply based on the opponents that you've played and beaten so far. You could make a legitimate argument. Please, nobody record this because I don't want Collin to put it back in my face. Arkansas could be the nation's #1 team. That's how impressive they have been against their opponents. And, I had them 5th. I think they fell in at 8th. So look, if they win at Georgia, they're going to get some #1 votes. I don't care what happens with Alabama, Ole Miss. No question about it.
In 1998, 20-year-old Collin went to Knoxville, Tennessee, and got my heart broken by T. Martin and the Vols and Clint Sterner stumbling and fumbling. The reason Stumble and Fumble is in the audio intro to the show is because I was in Neyland when that happened, and it's been with me forever. If we get up to that again, to 8-0, challenging for the national championship, I don't know if I'm going to be able to take it. So it's good to see Arkansas. It's good to see what they did. They outmuscled them. They outplayed them. I think, from everybody that listened to my handicap over the weekend, it was focused on the Arkansas injuries. Something that Pittman announced afterwards said, I kind of led the media astray on purpose. And I've got to stop reading.
That's smart.
I know, completely. Stromberg, completely healthy. Wagner, completely healthy at tackle. Treylon Burks, even though he's kind of nicked up and has injuries, he's fine when it's game time. And KJ Jefferson flat out saying, I couldn't come in for those 3 series that Hornsby was in because I had to wait for my meds to kick in. I would like some of those meds, whatever KJ's got going there. So it's interesting to see what's going to happen against Georgia this weekend, a team that's kind of been depleted on the outside. But I think another team that we might want to mention, 2 teams where some things are getting rumbled around. We don't want to not mention it is Herbstreit calling out LSU flat out. I mean, I think he had this queued up or anything. I think this was straight from the inside saying, you got to wonder if LSU is giving up on the season. And then Spencer Rattler getting booed for Caleb Williams. We want Caleb being chanted all throughout the stadium. I know we mentioned on this podcast last week that he doesn't have any big time throws and he has a handful of turnover worthy plays. He can't get the ball down deep. You have any take on LSU or Oklahoma to this point?
Well, we're going to find out if LSU cares this week when they play Auburn. And again, you still look at the rest of that schedule. It's so comical to even suggest a coach would be on the hot seat 2 years after winning a national title. But if LSU rolls out a 7-5, 6-6, yeah, Coach O's definitely on the hot seat. As far as Oklahoma, I think everybody's trying to figure out what in the world has happened to Oklahoma's offense. 2 weeks ago, that was the fewest points the Sooners had scored in the regular season under Lincoln Riley. Guess what? They scored fewer points against West Virginia last week. I don't think it's a fluke. I don't know what the reasoning is. We'll have to find out. Now they play Kansas State, and all Kansas State has done is they've won the last 2 times against Oklahoma, if I remember correctly, maybe 3 in a row. So K-State's got OU's number. This will be a big game for the Big 12, because if Oklahoma loses this game, unless Oklahoma State or Baylor runs the table, I don't expect either of those things happening. The Big 12 is going to be like the ACC, watching the playoffs from home.
That is, unless, Texas keeps on winning. If half their drives are going to be explosive with Casey Thompson, now they're able to run.
That's true.
Yeah, it's a tough schedule for them, though. Spencer Rattler better sign as many autographs as he can at $150 a pop this week, because that may not have as much value going into next week. Are you, Brett? I don't know your sleeping schedule. I know you're on the East Coast. For everybody listening, did you happen to watch your week 1 Arizona Wildcats that you love so much? Did you watch them give Oregon a problem through 3 quarters, or were you sleeping and already submitted your AP top 25?
No, what was I watching? Maybe BYU, USF. I live here in Tampa. I wanted to see the Bulls. The dynamic quarterback. I text somebody today. He looks like Michael Vick, except he's faster, if that's possible. But no, Arizona, look, they covered for me in week 1 against BYU. Since then, the wheels have, I would say they have fallen off, but I don't know if they ever actually had any wheels. They are among 7 teams right now that have not won a game this year, including the likes of Florida State, our friends in Tallahassee, UConn, and of course, UMass.
Our friends in Tallahassee. Absolutely. Well, I will, I think Oregon could lose this weekend. So we'll see. We'll see if I come out with a play against them. But something about this Stanford team is so Jekyll and Hyde. I don't know what it is. The numbers, the advanced numbers tell me they stink, but they're in these games. I am really glad that UCLA got that cover. I didn't want to have to backtrack on all my Stanford takes. So we'll see what happens this weekend. All right. Next segment, sources speed round. This is the segment I get to ask Brett as many questions as possible in a 60-second span. If I hear anything from my gambling years, I get to ask Brett to explain himself by throwing a flag and calling a timeout. Are you ready, Brett?
Let's do it.
All right. The clock starts now. Question 1, does Sam Pittman have any advantage with his history working under Kirby Smart?
Yes, sir.
Does Kirby Smart, though, have a bigger advantage than Sam Pittman going up against his old offensive lineman coach?
Yes, sir.
Is it enough for Arkansas to upset the Dogs?
No, sir. Sorry, Collin.
I'm going to call flag. Timeout.
Okay.
All right. So, I mean, we really have to break this down, because a lot of people say, well, Sam Pittman would work for Kirby and nobody can beat Saban, and Kirby can't beat Saban, and assistants can't beat Saban. So maybe Sam Pittman can't beat Kirby Smart. I think the whole thing is like Sam Pittman is extremely hands off. I think people need to realize that he doesn't actually even coach the offensive line, that he kind of stays. He said many times, like, I don't even get involved with the offensive line coaching, that Kendall Browse does a good job. Barry Odom does a good job. So I wonder if, and really what he was for Georgia is not just the offensive line coach. He was one of the best recruiters in the nation, right? Which was a thing that he was for Arkansas under Bielema. So I think it's interesting, the little cat and mouse game, but really it's Kendall Briles, calling the offense for Arkansas, and it's Todd Monken's offense being called for Georgia. So I don't think there's any advantage here, but do you have any other takes on Arkansas, Georgia this early in the week?
To quote current Colorado State coach Steve Adazio, the Bulldogs have more dudes. That's the difference,
especially when it comes against the rush defense. So really, if you're handicapping this game, you got to focus on what KJ Jefferson has been doing on deep throws, on 4 verts and deep throws with single coverage to Treylon Burks. You're going to get Treylon Burks single coverage. You're going to get burned. All right, clock back on. Will Lane Kiffin be the first assistant to beat Nick Saban?
No way.
Timeout. All right, I'm calling a flag. Line opens 20. Limit bets out the door. Ole Miss is down to 14. And should I just write you in on Saturday on the BBOC live show? The Bama posters coming on up again?
I'm afraid so. I mean, Kiffin's offense is incredible. He's going to put up a ton of points. I think Saban, they were again, it was Southern Miss, but Bryce Young looked really good. Showed some explosive plays. We talked about last week that against Florida is the first time in a few years that they had no plays over 30 yards. And then what do they do against Southern Miss? Albeit the degree of difficulty is a lot different. I just think Bama's defense will be the difference. And I think they learned a lot from that Florida game. Look, Kiffin's not going to go down fighting. Look, I'm not going to be thrilled laying 14 and a half. Because I know in the fourth quarter, Kiffin's going to be slinging it, and they're going to be ripe for the sneak in the back door there.
Yeah, and really, I mean, I haven't really, dived completely into this game yet. But the strength of the Alabama defense is the back 7, and that's huge against Ole Miss. It's a different cap against the Florida, where the trench was really the most important part for the Gators. So, all right, clock back on. What's your pick for the over-under? And I like how I had the question teed up at 77, Brett, but now it's 79 and a half at WinBet. It's going to 80. It's going to eclipse 80. What is your pick for the over-under on Bama Ole Miss?
Is that the first half line? Give me the over.
Absolutely. I'm looking for weather. See, there's a fast track. Okay, questions. What's the next move in conference realignment?
Air Force and Colorado State to the American, likely next week.
Wow. That's breaking news. Who is the Florida State dumpster fire team of the week?
Collin, this week, we don't have just one team, but 3 teams from the ACC. The top 3 teams from the ACC: Clemson, North Carolina, and Miami. A combined 4-6 against FBS teams this season. Congrats.
Hold on here. Let me change my camera. All right, timeout. Boop, throw the flag, Brett.
Another flag.
Your answers are not sitting well with me.
You're out of timeouts, but go ahead.
I am out of time. It's a 30-second. Minnesota lost to Bowling Green. Can PJ Fleck be fired? Do the administrator? I know they have to love him. They're buying into that shit, but the whole row of the boat that he owns, whatever. But you lost to Bowling Green.
I saw a tweet. I wish I knew who sent it out. I would proudly say who they were, but unfortunately I don't remember it. The author, but they said a week ago, worrying about PJ Fleck taking the USC job. This week, wondering if PJ Fleck will be fired for losing to Bowling Green.
Wow. Minnesota right now plus 2.5 at WinBet against Purdue. Purdue's got some injury situations we got to figure out first before we lay any money on that game. All right, last question. Which upcoming game can you not wait to see?
Forget about all the blockbusters this week. Must-see TV is next week. That's right. Winless UMass and winless UConn in Repus Bowl 2021. What's the Repus Bowl, you ask? Of course, it's Super Bowl backwards. Set your calendars for a week from Saturday.
Good luck on Stuckey and I not cutting 20 minutes of our podcast on that game. We'd love to dive into that. All right, that cuts it. That's Sources Speed Round. Let's go ahead and hop right into our next segment, the AP Top 25 versus the Action Network Top 25. Okay, so let's go ahead and start off with our Top 25, our AP Top 25, going up against the Action Network Top 25, where Clemson comes in, like we said, at 25. I've dropped him to 15th. Brett says, no go. You're not in there whatsoever. Now, I do like your inclusion of Wake Forest then at 24. That is a team that has a path to actually win the ACC. Their odds have come down from 150 to 1 down to, I think, 75 to 1. for just to win the ACC, it'd be a win bet. So that's definitely worth a look there. Not much difference. Baylor comes in after an upset victory. There's a good chance they can get another upset victory this weekend. You had them at 19th, 21st in the AP poll. I've got them power rated at 47th, and if they win again, I know, I'm so far off. I think the big thing for me is the offensive numbers are finally showing out. And even though I know they're about 3.5 points away from getting inside the top 25 from an Action Network power rating perspective, they just continue to be underdogs. They're going to have to keep winning to get bumped up. Michigan State comes in 18th in your poll, 17th in the AP top 25. I still have them down around 36th. There's nothing about that Nebraska victory at all that impressed me with Michigan State.
I know, but you got to reward teams when they win. I know where they are on the power ratings, but I had to put them in there somewhere.
Absolutely. Let's see who else I got. A big difference. Obviously, Texas A&M did not take that big of a hit for me. I still have them PR ranked at number 9. Brett, you came in at 17. The AP final came in at number 15. You have to think with how beat up their offensive line is, the inefficiency of Zach Calzada. This is not going to be the only loss they take. Forget Alabama. That's a loss, right? This is not going to be the only loss they take with that dysfunctional of an offense.
No, it's not. And that's a surprise. I mean, like you, I thought A&M would handle Arkansas, but yeah, they've got some serious problems on the offensive line. And I actually watched them play New Mexico, and I should have realized that they really didn't run the ball that well against New Mexico. I think they were trying to pass more and work on their passing game, but they really didn't. They named the score against New Mexico, but it's not like they overpowered them. And you take away the one long run against Arkansas, and they really had little to any offense in Arlington.
Yeah. And poor tackling, whatever that was on that shark wheel route to AJ Green that we hit out of the backfield, and you basically pushed him towards the end zone instead of wrapping up and tackling. That was,
you just said we, by the way, but go ahead.
Oh, we as in
Sue we.
Yeah, we yeah, it's an emotional time being 4-0. It's been a while. The next one we have to talk about obviously is Oklahoma. I've still got them power rated up at 4. You are the lowest of all AP voters at 15th. They came in at 6th in the AP. You are the lowest of 15. I guess you're done with the Sooners, right? Everything we talked about before.
No, I just look. I reward teams when they win and penalize them when they lose. And yeah, Oklahoma has not lost, but they squeaked by a Tulane team that gave up approximately 300 points to Ole Miss, or would have if Kiffin would have kept the pedal down. And then they win by 3 against a West Virginia team that lost to Maryland. They went to the final minute against a Nebraska team that lost to Illinois, lost to Michigan State. This is the worst offense Oklahoma has had under Lincoln Riley. And so I dropped them down. I certainly don't think they're a top 10 team. Why are they in the top 10 right now? I'll tell you why, because they started out the year in the preseason top 3, 4, or 5, and I had them in my top 5. But at this point, again, based on what has happened on the field to this point, I think they deserve to be dropped a lot. Now, if they win, I'll move them back up. I know the power ratings disagree. I know the Oklahoma fans disagree. I've had 2 people I work with that I used to work with at ESPN who are Sooner fans text me saying, what in the hell are you doing ranking them that low? It's because you're an Oklahoma State grad. And I said, it has nothing to do with where I went to school. I've got Oklahoma State lower than anybody else. I think I had them at 24th. They came in at 19th. Yep. It doesn't matter to me. Ohio State fans threatened my life after the Urban Meyer story. I ranked them preseason number 1 the next year. I could care less about the schools, and I'm looking at what they've done on the field. So look, I'm not saying they're going to finish at 15th or 16th, wherever I have them. But to me right now, in a snapshot of the month of September, they are not a top 10 team.
Well, as a guy that's got a couple dimes down on the opener of 10-1 on Oklahoma to win the national championship, bets I was placing back in January and February, I don't feel comfortable that they're winning the national championship at all. So
it's still alive, but yeah, you don't feel comfortable.
They're alive, but this is Separation Saturday coming up. We have 2 weeks in a row of major games. Red River is next week. Yep. Texas really has a chance to assert themselves and get back up into it. Going to switch gears. A team that I completely understand why you have ranked. You're the highest AP voter on this team. And there were a handful of voters that didn't even rank them. And I completely 100% believe I'm with you. And that's Fresno State. So Fresno State comes in at 18. I don't think they have a chance to be the best group of 5 and get into a New Year's 6 with so many teams in front of them. Coastal's in front of them. Cincinnati's in front of them. It may be tough sledding for them to get to a New Year's 6, but I 100% agree with you on Fresno State.
They've got a path. They just need some help. Obviously, if Cincinnati runs the table, they're out. Coastal runs the table. It could, I don't know. It could get interesting because Coastal's Power 5 win was Kansas. Fresno would have beaten UCLA and basically took Oregon to the brink. So if Oregon runs the table in the Pac-12, that boosts up Fresno's profile. And, I wouldn't say they have no chance, but certainly I think Cincinnati's their biggest obstacle.
Kalen DeBoer, the hottest G5 coaching name once we get to the conference championship weekend, first weekend of December.
Before we get there, but I don't think he wants to head to UConn or Georgia Southern. So,
but yeah, he'll take a look.
Yeah. Unless SC wants him, they can have him. Yeah. Who knows?
Who does SC want? Is Franklin really going to leave home to go out there? I don't know.
Who knows? I don't know. He'll get a raise. Everybody will get a raise except for you and me, Collin, because they'll all be linked to the USC job.
So the biggest game the biggest game on the board this weekend for me personally, from a money standpoint, from the futures, from everything that I've preached about Notre Dame, from everything I've preached about Cincinnati, from me having, bets at WinBet, you can not just bet on the Heisman, but you can bet on who's going to finish top 3 in the voting. This Cincinnati Notre Dame game is just paramount to everything else on the board. Brett, you come in and you've got them at number 8. The AP poll finishes them in at number 7. The Action Network, number 7. There's pretty much agreement there. Notre Dame at number 9. I'm trying to look. How high did you put these guys? Notre Dame at number 7 for you, and they came in the AP poll number 9. So a lot of parallel thinking when it comes to both Cincinnati and Notre Dame and their rankings. Very interesting dynamic. Marcus Freeman leaving Cincinnati. Brian Kelly was once at Cincinnati. You got any inside for us on this one?
I got a quick Brian Kelly story. First, I'm going to ask you a Brian Kelly trivia question. He's been coaching over 40 years. He had a losing season in 2016 at Notre Dame. Do you know the other 2 years he had a losing season or where he was at?
I'll say Cincinnati and Central Michigan.
You got one right. Central Michigan, he was 4-7, never had a losing record at Cincinnati. The only other time Brian Kelly had a losing record was at Assumption College. He went 7-12 as the women's softball coach in 1984. So there you go. The only 3 times Brian Kelly's had a losing record. If that's
who the hell's ever getting that? Who's ever getting that trivia question?
Well,
whenever we meet up for drinks at a bar, I am not getting into some cash for a question. I'm not getting into any trivia with you whatsoever.
Right. Yeah, Brian Kelly broke Newt Rockney's record, and he started out as a softball coach at Assumption College. Speaking of Brian Kelly, let's go back in the time machine. 2009, I went to Cincinnati, covered the Cincinnati Pitt game. He had his weekly radio show at the Montgomery Inn. Tremendous barbecue place, by the way. I highly recommend it if you've never been there. It's jam-packed. There's rumors about him in Notre Dame. Cincinnati was playing Pitt 2 days later. At the restaurant, Cincinnati was actually selling these red towels. I used to have one. I looked, I can't find it. It said, "Committed to Kelly." They were selling them for $5 each. Like they were going to sell enough towels to forward this money to BK so he wouldn't go to Notre Dame. After the show, I went up to him and I asked him, I said, "What's your response to all this speculation about you leaving after the season to Notre Dame?" And he didn't like that question. And he said, why can't a coach stay here a long time for a long career? And he referenced Bobby Bowden at Florida State and a couple others. Okay, so I wrote my story. 2 days later, Cincinnati trails 31-10 first half. They come back and beat Pitt 45-44 behind wide receiver kick returner Marty Gilliard. Look him up on YouTube. The kid was amazing. And yes, 5 days later, on the night of Cincinnati's team banquet, Kelly accepted the Notre Dame job.
Of course, you can't trust. When it comes to injuries and where these coaches are going, you can't trust anything any of these guys are saying. So
sadly, you're right.
Yeah, big game. Do you know who you're taking on Saturday? I can't see a situation where I'm taking Notre Dame. I'm probably going to be in the Cincinnati boat by the time we come to Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, you look at all the numbers, we've talked about Notre Dame. We talked, that's why we liked Wisconsin. They had 3 yards. I had 0 yards rushing against Wisconsin. Notre Dame had 3. Okay. But still, you want, the magic of the Irish, the nation's second longest home winning streak. And Cincinnati, they are not that good as a road favorite. Yeah, they did take care of Indiana, but everything bounced their way against Indiana. I don't know. I think I'm trying to find a way to take Notre Dame. I wouldn't feel good about it because all the numbers and everything else says Cincinnati should be the play here. I was surprised. I remember texting you on Saturday and you thought Notre Dame would be favored. Now I see Cincinnati as a small favorite. So yeah. I'm going to have to go with the Stuckey method and flip a coin on Saturday.
Well, money definitely talks, and that's what's driving this market right now. And I don't think it's going to stop coming in on Cincinnati, but there is definitely a buy. I can't believe I'm saying this. There's definitely a buy point on Notre Dame. And when I look at the advanced stats on these two teams and standard down success rate defensively, they rank 9th and 11th. So what does that mean? There's going to be a lot of 3rd and longs. And I think the handicap in this game comes down to who is able to convert 3rd down. So definitely that is where my handicap has started today. When I started doing a deep dive, it's that these two defenses are tremendous on 1st and 2nd down. It's against success rate. So a lot of 3rd and longs coming up, and whoever can convert those is going to be the one that wins this game. Last question I got to ask you. Maryland beats Iowa on Friday. Are you going to drop Iowa from 5th all the way out of the top 25? Or what are you going to do there?
They do have a win over Iowa State. I mean, I don't preconceive, I'm going to drop this team here or there. I would probably drop them between 15 to 20, maybe, depending on what else happens. Certainly they're out of the top 10, no question.
And still can easily win the West and shake up everything.
And then Maryland would jump in the rankings too.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, from a futures perspective, I had over 5.5 on Maryland going into the season, and couldn't be happier with the way things are going. But this Iowa
wins,
this this Iowa thing has got to come to an end at some point. All right, so this is the Heisman Handicap. These odds are via WinBet. Brett, we're not going to just take a look at who's going to win the Heisman and the odds on that. Let's take a look at WinBet's top 3 to finish for the Heisman Trophy, and I think that's. That is a bet where you can actually find some value because their teams could find paths to be a college football playoff contender or a 1-loss. And, that works well for them. And if we find a quarterback, or I should say running back or wide receiver or defensive player that has better odds than their team does of winning the national championship, then obviously there is something there. Now, to make the top 3 in voting, Bryce Young of Alabama and Matt Corral of Ole Miss are minus 500 to finish top 3. Listen, the guy that loses between Alabama and Ole Miss, because you've said it before, the Heisman is also team dependent. So let me ask you, are you still considering the loser of this game in your Heisman voting?
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, because I don't have to put my vote in next week. But, certainly if Matt Corral has more to gain with the win than Bryce Young, if Bryce Young wins, Alabama wins, Young puts up decent numbers, he's still on track. If Corral wins, if Ole Miss wins, Corral's got to have a monster game. Will it vault him to the clear-cut favorite like it did Joe Burrow with LSU a couple of years ago? Ole Miss still has some minefields the rest of the way. I don't think they're going to go undefeated. How many losses are 2 losses or too many losses? One guy on this list that I think has some good value is JT Daniels is plus 900 to finish in the top 3. Look, Georgia's defense is incredible. They can run the ball. JT, when he's healthy, can put up some numbers. Well, guess what? If Georgia runs the table and beats Alabama for the SEC title game, and Daniels is putting up decent numbers, and Ole Miss has suffered 3 or 4 losses, JT and Georgia won the head-to-head against Alabama, I think Daniels has some great value to get there. So if you like Georgia to go 13-0, I doubt you can get them at plus 900 to win the SEC or even to win the national title. So I think getting Daniels at plus 900 to get in the top 3, again, if you think they're going to go 13-0, because I think that's his only path, I would absolutely take that.
Definitely has way better value than taking Georgia to win the national championship. A name on this
or
list?
The SEC
or
the
SEC.
It can't be that high.
Yeah, I think JT Daniels that's very good value. That is an example of a player that you'd want to buy instead of taking what the team odds are for the futures. Another name on here, Bijan Robinson for Texas, is at 12-1. I've seen Texas at 80-1 to win the national title. And I think if a running back's going to win this, they're going to have to be that good. So definitely I would pass on that number. The one that intrigues me here, and I have to ask you, lean on your expertise as a Heisman voter. CJ Stroud took the week off to get healthy, but his numbers are excellent. Does it matter that he took a week off against Akron in your eyes as a Heisman voter?
No, absolutely not. Nobody will remember that. Nobody will say, oh, you didn't play against Akron. They'll remember what he did against Oregon, and they'll remember, it'll mean more what he does in the upcoming games against Penn State, against Michigan, and if they're in the Big Ten title game. So yeah, it's not like anyone, look, I know more people vote for the Heisman than vote for the US presidential election, but I'm pretty confident that nobody that has a ballot will consider that CJ Stroud didn't play against Akron.
Other names up there, Casey Thompson moves from 50-1 to 30-1. This is 30-1 to finish top 3 in the voting. If Texas runs the table, right, and they win the Big 12 with one loss,
I think he's got a better shot than Robinson. I just think the Heisman's geared. It's become a quarterback award. I say that Devontae Smith won it last year, but it's going to take some kind of season like that. I don't think Robinson's going to be able to put up those kind of numbers. I think it would be more Thompson. And Thompson, it helps to have a storyline.
Yeah.
Thompson didn't start the season as the starter. He came in. Does he save the Longhorn? Not save the season, but now does he lead them to the Big 12 championship? I mean, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
I mean, he's I don't have the stat in front of me, but since the Alamo Bowl, he's led Texas on, I think, 23 scores out of 26 or 27 drives. That's very, very impressive. I doubt he can keep that going, but he can make a run, certainly, if the Horns can get past their nemesis, Oklahoma and Dallas.
Yeah, this is quickly becoming a pro-Texas point of view. So at least from my side, that's 2 weeks in a row now. I'm noticing things in the box score. I know Texas put up 70 against Texas Tech, and that's not really a big deal, but the offense that they had coming into the season wasn't putting 70 points up on anybody. And Sark has changed some things around. I think having Casey Thompson at quarterback is a huge. It's given Bijan Robinson room to run also. One name.
Wait. Time. I get one timeout.
Okay.
So how does an Arkansas guy suddenly on the Texas bandwagon?
Yeah.
I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that Steve Sarkisian follows you on Twitter, does it?
Well, I listen. I appreciate Coach Sark's interest in what we're doing over at the Action Network, and I wouldn't want to do anything to offend him. But to be completely honest, I got a 15-year-old who's looking at going to UT. He's going to be a computer engineer, and he's thinking about living in Austin when he gets out of high school. So this could be a really, if having a son go to the rival is like just the craziest thought ever. But your kids come before anything else. So maybe. And
when he's at UT, they'll be playing Arkansas every year.
I don't even know how that's going to work out. I'll see him down on 6th Street, either 6th Street in Fayetteville or 6th Street in Austin. It'll be one of those two, but that's how it happened. But no, I mean, I thought Casey Thompson not being named the starter and what he did last year in the bowl game. I thought he was the more explosive quarterback, and that last drive he had against Arkansas kind of lived up to what he was. I never had any disbelief in what Sark's offense was. And so we'll see how they go. That's a big game next week. Excited to see it. Before we get off the Heisman talk, I just have to say one thing. KJ Jefferson's not on this list. KJ Jefferson doesn't even have a number. I mean, Spencer Sanders is on here at 80-1, Brett. KJ Jefferson's not even on this list. But what do we got to do to get the dual threat quarterback of 260, 70 pounds can only throw a deep pass and can only juke out the entire front seven? What do we got to do to get him some love for the Heisman?
Well, wouldn't it be better if there's no love, so you can grab a giant number, and then if it comes to fruition, you'll be the smartest guy in the room.
You know what? This is how we're going to leave the segment. I'm going to ask you. You have to be honest with me, or else I'll have to look it up. Did you vote for Troy Smith or Darren McFadden for Heisman back in 2006?
God, I can't remember, but I think I voted for McFadden.
Yeah. I'm still shocked that Troy Smith won that Heisman. Darren McFadden was easily the most valuable player. All right.
Wait, don't get me started about how McCaffrey didn't win the Heisman, because that was the biggest Heisman, you know,
West Coast can't
faux
win it.
pas. I know. And I worked at ESPN then, so I would watch every game in the war room where we had 12 TVs from noon to 2 a.m. And I saw McCaffrey and Stanford play every single week. That kid was so freaking amazing. But unfortunately, 9 or 10 other games were after, 9 Eastern. So nobody saw him.
That's when you were back doing the show with Mac Brown, who's having some struggles there with the Tar Heels these days. I wonder.
That's right.
Yeah, I wonder how. I don't know if Mac wants to get to retirement if things don't work out at North Carolina. We'll see. All right, let's move on to our last segment, the playoff payoff. So these odds are presented by via WinBet. Brett, before we get into the odds to win the national championship through the college football playoff, I have to ask you to rank the one-loss teams from Florida, Ohio State, Texas A&M, UCLA, Auburn, NC State. I think the first question is who's the number one-loss team if the college football playoff rankings came out today?
If they came out today, who's got the best win? God, would it?
Are you still looking at UCLA over LSU as the best win and giving a pass on a Fresno State loss, right?
Yeah, I mean, NC State. I mean, they beat Clemson.
Are you discounting the UCLA loss to Fresno, or are you discounting the NC State loss to Mississippi State on the road?
I think they would actually give more value to the NC State loss, and I think beating Clemson means more than beating LSU. So I'm thinking how the committee would think. I think they would have NC State over UCLA. Texas A&M, no quality wins. Ohio State, no quality wins. Florida, hasn't beat anybody. It sounds crazy, but I think the committee would actually favor NC State at this point right now, based on the Clemson win and the loss to Mississippi State over the other one-loss teams.
500-1 via WinBet to win the national title, NC State. For those of you listening to Mr. Brett McMurphy hype up the Wolfpack.
The curse has been broken, according to Dave Doran. The Wolfpack curse has been broken.
Even a howl. Yeah, I mean, that was a team we hyped up in the summer, and then after 3 offensive turnovers at Mississippi State, just kind of let them go by the wayside. So I am looking at the college football champion odds. Brett, one of the props that WinBet has up right now is Alabama or Georgia -195 to win the college football playoff. Now, there's a number of scenarios that could happen here, right? Alabama or Georgia face each other in an SEC championship game. One could lose. They could both get in. They'll be seeded 1 and 4 they'll be seeded somehow magically 1 and 3 or 2 and 4 so that they don't face each other right off again. But there is an outside possibility. These are the 2 teams playing for the national championship. There is an outside possibility that one of these teams makes it to the championship game and they're -5 or better, which would represent this number at -195. Or would you take this prop on Alabama and Georgia, or would you bet the field?
I actually would take Alabama and Georgia. I don't like, having minus money on something like that. But, your example you gave, you're basically saying if either one of these teams are in the championship, they would have to be less than a 5-point favorite for you not to have value in this play. And you could have Alabama and Georgia meet for the title. Now, look, neither team could get there also, but I think more times than not, Alabama or Georgia will be in the title game this year. And the spread's going to be more than 5, no matter who they're playing. You do the numbers, that better than anybody. So
Right.
yeah, I actually think there's actually value in that, as opposed to taking the field.
Yeah, and I think the reason why you have to take Alabama or Georgia, if you look at our power ratings over at Action Network, Alabama's 2.5 points better than Georgia. So let me give you some fictitious lines about what Georgia would be against the competition of teams like 3 through 6 here. Georgia would be 6.5 points a favorite over Ohio State. Georgia would be 8 points over Oklahoma, 8 points over Penn State, and they would be 9.5 against Florida and they would be more than 10 against Cincinnati. So, when you correlate that minus 195 as a championship game spread money line versus what the spread would be, there's definitely value in Alabama or Georgia.
Yeah, and then you add, like you said, add 2.5 points to Bama, and it would definitely be the play.
Yeah, definitely. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the odds that we've got up here. Now that we said the one loss would be NC State, probably. I mean, there's going to be more one-loss teams coming up here real quick. I think Oklahoma might be one of them after facing.
And remember, that's just right now. I'm not saying at the end of the year that's my one loss team. I'm just saying right now, if they had to pick the playoffs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Obviously going to change because the boat's going to get more populated coming up soon, and some of these one-loss teams are going to turn into two-loss teams. Last chance to buy Cincinnati at 40-1 in your opinion? I have to say it. I mean, it's a big game.
I know. Look, I'll answer your question before you answer it. Can 12-0 Cincinnati get in over any of those one-loss teams? The answer is no. And I'll make it as succinct as possible. If Florida's a one-loss team, that means they beat Georgia and Alabama. That trumps Cincinnati's best wins of Indiana, Notre Dame. If Ohio State gets in, that means they beat Penn State, Michigan, and then either Iowa or Wisconsin in the Big Ten title game. Texas A&M gets in. That means they win out. They beat Bama and then likely Georgia to win the SEC. Also LSU, they would have defeated. UCLA, maybe the only one that Cincinnati could jump because their best wins remaining would be at Stanford and then again Oregon and then USC and then again who emerges in the North. Even Auburn, a one-loss Auburn, if they went out, that means they will have beaten LSU, Georgia, A&M, Bama, and whoever they play in the SEC title game. NC State already has the Clemson win. They would also have to beat Miami, North Carolina, and then Miami and North Carolina again in the ACC title game. I think the only two teams that Cincinnati would have a legit chance to stay above would be UCLA and NC State. But basically the SEC and Big Ten teams, no way, no how. Don't shoot the messenger.
Well, such a big game coming up this week. In the next 2 weeks, a lot of teams are going to go one loss, two loss, and they'll be out of the picture completely. I think two teams that we got to pay attention to. Penn State really kind of dictates the rest of the season for them. I mean, they're in the driver's seat. I know they have to go to Ohio State. You have to win that game to make it into the Big Ten championship. But at 40-1, I think those are pretty good odds against a defense that hasn't figured anything out. You can put Kerry Coombs up in the box all you want. They have not figured anything out. And then, Arkansas, I've had a lot of questions, especially from my grandmother who's looking for a new refrigerator.
You didn't get her one?
Well, I mean, the Christmas is coming up, right? I mean, there's a lot of mouths to feed around here. I gotta parse out the gifts. Arkansas is 80-1, and I've had a lot of questions about it this week. And frankly, the point spread that it is suggests that Arkansas's chances of winning this weekend are about 11%. So if you want to take that, and this game doesn't even mean anything, Brett.
So you're saying there's a chance?
Well, there's not a lot of chance of winning, but if they lose this game, they can still go to the college football playoff. Because remember, you got to beat Bama. You're not going to the SEC championship game unless you beat Alabama. And if you beat Alabama, then you're in. But you got Ole Miss to beat, which is possible. You've already beaten Texas A&M. You can beat LSU. You can beat everybody else in the West. But this Georgia game, it doesn't matter to Arkansas's future as far as making the college football playoff. You can lose this game. The 80-1 will become better value at another number. And if they win this game, you're still going to have to beat Alabama. I mean, I don't
because Bama would win the head-to-head. You can't lose to Georgia, or excuse me, you can't beat Georgia and then lose to Alabama,
right?
And get in because Bama would own the head-to-head,
right?
So you're right. You got to beat Alabama no matter what happens with this game.
There are books out there that allow open parlays, and when I say open parlays, that means I'm going to make it a 5-team parlay, and I get to come in and pick the teams whenever I want. And if you really
Arkansas for the next 5 weeks.
And that's what I'm saying. If you really think Arkansas can win the national championship, then you need to open up an open parlay for about 4 spots. And you're going to start with Alabama. And then you're going to
But wouldn't you make more money though if you just took Arkansas on the money line and rolled it over every week? Because I've heard some people talk about that before, as opposed to tying it up in a parlay. If you just take the money line and roll it over every week, it would actually exceed whatever you would win off the parlay. But of course, if you do that, after 3 or 4 weeks, you're going to have this big bankroll and go, wow, maybe I should stop right here, or do I keep going?
Well, I've actually done that a few times where the number of wins gets so high for the ticket that you bought that you just kind of push off and go and take, like, you know, some guy, some team that's on the board that's like minus 35 favorites and in the parlay. So, you know, you have to be kind of an artist when you're building these open parlay spots, but when you consider what 80-1 is, you can get to that real fast with Arkansas' schedule.
Oh, yeah.
I try to find an open parlay, a book that allows that. I wouldn't start with Georgia. I'd start with Alabama. And then you've got to worry about the SEC championship. And then you got to worry about the semifinals. And trust me, you will get over 80-1 really fast. Long shots on the board that are still undefeated. We mentioned NC State down at 500-1. Is an undefeated BYU going to the college football playoff too? Did I ask that? I mean,
yeah, no, they can't. They play 7 Power 5 opponents, but then you look at the rest of their schedule. You know, Utah State, USF, a couple other teams. Again, when you're comparing them with a SEC or Big Ten school, the schedule does not match up with those schools. I guess you could make an argument. Now, this would be fascinating, and I do not know the answer to this. Only question I don't know an answer to, just a joke. What if Cincinnati and BYU run the table? Who will the committee rank higher? I would think they would rank, based on what they've done in the past, I think they would rank BYU higher because they would have 7 Power 5 wins. You know, yeah, they're all from the Pac-12, but they're still Power 5. So it's almost like they played a league schedule with 7 Power 5 games. Cincinnati would have 2 wins against Indiana and Notre Dame. UCF's the next best team on their schedule, but they're not ranked. So that would be fascinating if that happened, to see where the committee fell with BYU and Cincinnati.
I've always had this conspiracy theory, and I know that the people that love NBA, they've always had that conspiracy theory that the bigger markets get the referee calls because of the TV ratings for the NBA finals. But we just went through the Bucks and the Suns in the NBA finals, so I'm not really sure that's valid. I've wondered ever since this introduction of the college football playoff, are we trying to get higher TV ratings with the rankings and some of the teams and the talk? Because does BYU or Cincinnati draw enough eyeballs for a January 1st, game that precedes the Rose Bowl? I mean,
yeah. Well, here, Collin, I've actually been on the mock playoff selection committee a couple of years, and it basically, you do a past season and you go through the whole process, not a 5-week process, but in one afternoon you go through the process of ranking the teams. And believe me, all of the numbers and information you look at, I really, really doubt. Again, I can't speak for people that are on the committee. I know when I went through the process, I didn't even consider TV rankings. I looked at who they beaten, what's their toughest wins, their worst loss, the game's home, road, margin of victory, game control, whatever words you got to throw out there. I know the conspiracy. I love conspiracy theories. They're not picking teams based on TV ratings. As much as we would love to think that, they're simply going to pick the better teams. Now, you could argue, well, why don't they pick a Group 5 team? Well, they don't have as tough a schedule as the Power 5 teams. And also, by the way, the Power 5 teams also draw more eyeballs, but they're getting picked because of the tougher conference schedule and overall schedule, and not because of the number of eyeballs, although it makes for a good conspiracy theory.
Well, that's good news for a team like NC State, because I believe I read an article where it said ESPN's not allowed to say the word Raleigh anymore because it doesn't sound like big enough of a city or big enough venue. So really, for me, Penn State and Texas are the 2 long shots I think you got to take a look at before we get into Separation Saturday, 2 Separation Saturday weeks in a row. Do you have any other? You got any other big one? If you had to pick a national champion right now, let's end with this. I think Georgia's still winning the national championship. I said Georgia Oklahoma national championship game. I still think Georgia's winning the national championship. Are you veering off or still staying with the Saban?
Yeah. I mean, I picked Alabama before the season. I'm not gonna change every week. I'm gonna stick with them. but Georgia is much, much better than I anticipated them being. And, like you said, it'd be basically less than a field goal game on a neutral site. That sounds right. Look, this is only September. I think we'll have a much better idea in a couple of weeks, but I certainly don't feel as confident as I do about Alabama before the season. But I do think, if they're not the best team right now, Georgia's 1A, then Alabama's 1B. But I still give Alabama the slight edge.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like we said before, they're both power rated well ahead of everybody else. And a lot of teams are about a touchdown less than both of them. So that's where it is. That's where we're going to keep our money at. This is it. This has been the Big Bets on Campus Sources edition. Tomorrow afternoon, you can hear our red hot group of 5 experts, Mike Iannello and Mike Calabrese. I think they went 4 or 5 on their parlay last week. These guys are hot. Wow. Give the G5 deep dive episode a listen. Late Thursday night, Stuckey and I will return for our week 5 betting preview, all here on the BBOC podcast. Brett has to get back to making athletic directors' phones blow up. And I got to get back to, watching some of these games light up on the screen and figure out why the lines are moving a certain way and what group is pushing money across the counter. Thanks for joining me, Brett. I'll see everybody at the window.